Okay, so today we're at Gosport Borough Council and we're speaking to Mark Hook. So could you just give us an introduction to yourself, Mark, and sort of your background and what you do, really?
Yeah, I'm Councillor Mark Hook, Councillor for the Alverstoke Ward and also leader of Gosport Borough Council. I've done 28 years service in two stints, first from 1983 to 91 and from 1998 to current.
Oh, okay. And you live locally in Gosport?
Yep. I moved in Gosport in 1980 and fell in love with the place ever since.
Oh, okay. Okay. So what made you become a councillor, may I ask?
I think it's one of those things where I'm a great believer in service to the community. And when I was at school, all those many years ago, we went through power cuts, we had refuse in the streets. And I just thought there's better ways to live life than that. And so I've wanted to serve the community.
Oh, okay. And you, how did you start here? Delivering leaflets to somebody else, I understand?
Yeah, when I moved in 1980, Don Lucas was out delivering leaflets in Leesland, Sherwood Road, where I live. And I said to Don, you know, I'll give you a hand. I was a great supporter of Maggie Thatcher. She'd just come to power in 1979. And I thought, actually, this is the way forward. I'll help the Conservatives. Don made a few phone calls, and half an hour later, there was a bundle of leaflets there and said, "Come out and deliver with me."
And that's a big part of campaigning, isn't it? As leafleting, as we all know.
It's important to get your message across.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. So, I think we can ask you, if you've done it for 28 years, what are the things you enjoy about being a councillor?
I think the most important thing is that service to the community. So, you know, there's some really good wins that we've had. Just recently, I've got 6 of the rough sleepers into accommodation, and you know, that's important because there are those people who are vulnerable and need help, and that's what our job is. We should be there to help the people, and so, you know, for people like Aidan and Ruby, who had very difficult lives, to actually give them a start, a fresh start in life, I think is important.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I understand as well, a little lady told me, that you've actually had young wayward people actually staying at your house just to give a sort of break and sort of help the parents, carers sort out a way forward for those young people.
Yeah, over the years we've had a few young people stay in there. I think sometimes young people need a break from parents or guardians. Sometimes it gets a bit too much for both, not only the guardians and the parents, but also for the young person. So we've had people stay and give them a bit of time to chill and relax, and most of the time it's worked out very well.
Yeah, no, that's very brave. There's not many people who would bring anyone in, not anybody, but you understand what I mean, a troubled teenager into their home. So that's perhaps something we weren't aware of. So there's obviously some downsides to being a councillor politician. Anything you wish to discuss?
I think the worst part of being a politician is the amount of time that you have to leave your family and to put back things that you would normally want to do. But then that's because you've got that sense of serving the community that you do that, but your family do suffer.
Yeah, I mean, how many hours on average would you say you have to commit to the role a week?
As the leader of the council, I do between 40 and 55 hours a week, depending on the amount of meetings during the course of that week.
So it's virtually a full-time job, isn't it?
It always has been.
Yeah.
It always has been, and I think as we go on, it will continue to be so. There's more. We're put upon more by governments and so on, regardless of which political parties in governance.
What's the you do get quite a lot of controversy in the media. Does that affect your family?
Yes, it does. I'm thick-skinned, broad-shouldered. I can take it. After 28 years, you'd expect a politician to be able to take some of the negativity, but it's not fair on the family. And an example was the introduction of car parking charges back in 2004, and my daughter was at school at the time, and the news sent out a photographer to effectively spy on me, get a photograph of me getting into my car in a car park, and there was a derogatory headline. Tasha went to school, the children all took the mickey out of her, she came home crying. And the news and other media, and indeed other political parties, should be more sensitive, I think, to the effect it has on family life.
Yeah, I mean, on the car parking charges, which was perhaps seen as an unpopular thing, does all that money, and well, I don't know how much money it makes, does that money go to central government? Where's that money actually go?
No, the important thing with car parking charges, this current year we will raise £850,000, and that helps subsidise the council tax bills that everyone gets.
So indirectly, it keeps our council tax as an individual. It reduces that a little bit more.
It reduces it a lot because for every 1% increase on the council tax, that raises £65,000. So that's nearly 15% of council tax. So if we were to get rid of car parking charges, then you'd look at putting the council tax up by 15%, which is totally unacceptable.
Yeah, absolutely. So no, that's explained quite a negative perception, and hopefully people can understand. So what we're going to do is we're going to move on to some other questions that are more about you, so we can get to know you as a person. Are you quite happy to do that?
Always happy.
That's lovely. Thanks, Mark. So we're back with Mark, and we're going to move on to, for me, not that you weren't interested before, but some more interesting things. So when you were young, Mark, what did you want to be when you grew up?
Ironically, I wanted to be a bank manager. I've always had a great love for mathematics, and it was one of those things which I thought, actually, you know, I'd want to be a bank manager.
Doesn't sound particularly exciting.
Well, it could have been worse. I could have been an accountant.
Yeah, very true. And has your love of maths continued?
Yes, it always has.
Yeah.
And I think that's, if you talk to my colleagues, I deal with the budgets, and I thoroughly enjoy that part of it, trying to make it stack up and work.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Okay. Who knows you best?
My daughter. I think my daughter knows me better than anyone else. We have no secrets from each other, and she's a great girl to be around.
Yeah. And so is she very similar to your wife? Are you a close-knit family as such?
We are. There's myself and my wife, obviously, at home with Tasha, who's 23, and her 4-year-old son. So there's 3 generations in the household, which keeps us very lively, very energetic. But she, I think, is very, very similar to my wife. Very, very similar. They are both strong-minded characters. They both have their views, and sometimes when it clashes, it's quite interesting to be the one in the middle to try and separate them.
The mediator.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's nice to hear that you have such a close relationship with your daughter, because ordinarily it is a mother-daughter who's close, but so they're so similar you almost have to sort of referee them.
Yeah, they're very similar. I think if Tasha would fall down in the playground and hurt herself, she'd go to mum.
Yeah.
But if it's a case of just wanting to bounce ideas and chat and want cuddles, then it's daddy time.
Yeah, no, that's nice to hear. Okay, so if there's any one thing in your life that you feel makes you feel weak, what would you say that is?
I think death, and I say that because when I was 17 years of age, there was 2 experiences that really brought home how frail your bodies are. One was at the time, my dad, who was in the army, had left the army. We had a restaurant in Fareham, and I used to help out there. And there was a young girl called Helen Spreadbury, and she had leukemia. And she would come into the restaurant with her family, and her little ID bracelet from the hospital, half would have her medication, and the other half would have "I love Mark" on there, which was very sweet. And
How old were you at the time? 17?
I was 17, yeah. And they would come in, and I'd say to Helen, you know, what would her wish be? And it was, I wanted to live till I was 10. And unfortunately, she died when she was 10 years and 5 days old. So you realise actually how frail the body is. And then one of my friends, Peter Harris, who's a motorcyclist, in those days your chin strap could be loose underneath. And again, he died. He hit a lamppost and unfortunately was decapitated. So you realise actually how frail the human body is, and that does make me feel weak. Apart from my own ailments,
that we all have as we get older.
yeah,
No, that's quite. I mean, that must have been hugely distressing.
yeah, it was very, very distressing at the time, but it makes you realise over the years. I mean, here we are, some 42 years on, and those memories stay with you. And the memories of a white wicker casket with Helen's body in on the funeral, it stays with you. And it's those times makes you the person you are, and you think actually, what I'd like to do is try and make things better.
Yeah, because I sometimes wonder, because sometimes people say who's been the greatest influence. I think sometimes life can be the greatest influence on you as an individual. Our experiences can make us the person we are, can't they, really?
Yeah, the experience of life, it's so important. It's so important. I mean, there are people who influence you throughout the years, and I get that. But I think it's life experiences which are so important.
Yeah, and death, in fact. So.
Yeah, and I think the public actually, they all have their own experiences, so it makes them the people that they are. So sometimes I understand when people say I don't like Mark Hook. They don't know Mark Hook, but the way that their life experiences has been taught, they've chosen to make that decision, and I understand that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. So, we'll lift it up a bit. So, what would you say your favourite place to escape to is?
I've got two places where I love to escape. One is a village called Lesley, and that was where my first family home was. My dad was in the army, as I said earlier. From 1962 to 66, we were in Tripoli in North Africa. Great place to be. Learned to swim in the Mediterranean, and so many stories I could tell you about what me and my brother got up to. My brother's only a year older than me, but probably best not for the camera. So we moved to Lesley. My dad got a posting in Tidworth, so it's only an hour up the road.
So that's home for you?
Yeah. So 1966 to 75, junior schools, senior schooling, nice places, played a lot of sport, thoroughly enjoyed it. So if I want to go back, and the family often enjoy it when I say let's get in the car because we're going to Lesley, and they've got an old castle there. And
who, the family?
Yeah.
If you wish.
Yeah. It's a derelict thing, but again, in the moats, I was in the Cubs down there, so it was an area that I used to go and play in, and Lesley Sports was the football club as well, and we used to live right opposite the rec. So it's just a great place to go back.
A lot of happy memories.
It's great. And the second place that I like to escape to is my virtual reality, and I'm a great sci-fi fan.
You may get people turning off at this point, Mark.
Well, I'll try and keep it brief.
You're a sci-fi fan?
Yeah, Star Trek, Star Wars, massive Doctor Who fan.
The modern Doctor Who or any Doctor Who?
My Doctor Who was John Pertwee
Yes.
when I grew up.
Yeah.
Although I have to say that David Tennant was a tremendous Doctor Who. But I sit there and early hours of the morning I'll put Netflix on and watch Doctor Who, because it's great escapism.
It is, it's good.
And Star Wars, of course, they just repeated all those on the television just recently. And I like to think of myself a bit more of a Han Solo character, although the public out there, some of them will believe that I'm Darth Vader, but I get it.
I know. They need to get to know you, though, don't they? Really?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Absolutely. That's quite entertaining. Mark Hook, the Darth Vader, that's a different headline.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that. So, who's been the greatest influence on you as a person today?
The greatest influence goes back to the 70s, and the problems that we had with power cuts and refuse in the street. And then along came a lady in 1979 that changed the face of politics, and that's Maggie Thatcher. And you know, another Marmite character. You either loved her or hate her. I loved her. I thought she was strong. She was determined. She wanted to help people. And sometimes the old adage, you have to be cruel to be kind. But I think that for 10, 12 years she was right for the country. I admired her tremendously, what she did, and the sense of wanting to serve. And I got it from Maggie.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you still obviously think of her with a huge, or retrospectively, a high amount of respect as well.
Yeah, and when she came to Gosport for the Falklands commemorations, and I remember her walking down the high street and her security guy saying, look, we need to get you inside. And Maggie would say that because the veterans were there, these are my men. And she would spend hours talking to them, and she always had time.
Yeah.
Magnificent lady.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, I remember those times. The Falklands obviously has such a close place in a lot of our hearts. If you had, as the final question, if you had one day to live, what would you do first?
Breathe.
Okay. Is that as far as you're going to tell me?
Well, I'd like to start with the breath, because at least that means I've got the day to survive.
Yeah, no, that's quite entertaining.
No, breathe. What would I do one day? I would love to tell every member of my family that I love them. Because I think people seem these days, I don't know why, not to tell each other that you love each other. And you know, whether it's my eldest son, who's a big chap who's just retired from playing American football, I want to hug him and tell him I love him. You know, my other two sons likewise, my daughter, my grandchildren. I've got 5 grandchildren. My wife.
Just spend that day with your family.
Yeah, just to let them know that in the last day that I love them and that I've missed them.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you know, people don't get that opportunity today. So my message to everyone out there at the moment is: tell the people you love that you love them.
Share the love.
Yeah.
So on the subject of love, again, Gosport is Marmite. You either love it or hate it. Where do you sit on that subject?
Oh, I love it.
What do you love about it?
Well, there's so many things to love. The obvious ones are the natural coastlines, Alva Valley Country Park, and the good things that we have in Gosport, so many sporting things. The main thing is that when friends turn up on my door, and they say to me, oh, we were just popping through. No, you don't pop through Gosport. No. You come to Gosport for a reason.
Absolutely.
So I just love the fact that if people come up, it's because they actually want to see you, rather than they were just travelling through and thought, just pop in.
And there is something about living on a sort of peninsula, isn't there, that makes us a little bit, not a siege mentality, but I think we do pull together.
My wife always says, and I agree with her, that Gosport is a village community of 80,000 people.
Yeah.
And that we do tend to know everyone else's business. And that's one of the good things about Gosport. You know, it is unique.
Absolutely. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you today, and thank you so much for your time.
More than welcome.
Thank you. Okay, so finally we're back with Mark, and I'm going to ask you some questions which I've been wanting to know the answers to. So, what was the situation with your business rates and your shop?
Back in 2015, I'd actually managed to effectively sell the shop. So we ran down the business, and it was a deliberate reasoning for running it down. We had a company called Max 99p that were very interested in coming in. We'd sorted out the deal. And so we were Lynn and myself were going to retire. In doing that, as I said before, you run down the business deliberately. With 4 weeks to go, they found out that Pound World were going into the old post office next door to us, and they pulled out of the deal. That made trading very, very difficult for us, and of course you can't just press on the gas and accelerate and go back to where you were. So we had a few difficult times, and it's well documented. I think the news put the timeline in there, and we owed business rates. I put my hands up and said, yes, we do owe it. You know, there was no head in the sand, there's no arguments about that it was due. And so I kept the council informed as to what we were doing, and they said, look, best thing to do is carry on paying the current years and leave that as a debt, and then because the business was being sold again, to pay it back, and that's what we did. And I'm grateful to Councillor Philip Raffaelli, who was Chairman of Standard and Governance, who asked for an investigation as to see whether, as council leader, I was offered any preferential treatment, and the monitoring officer looked into it, and it was quite clear that I was treated no different than any other business. But the key is communication. If you tell the council what's happening and work with the council, they're prepared to work with you. And I was in the fortunate position of being here every day, having done 40 to 55 hours a week work on the council, that I'm here, and I could communicate with them to let them know what was happening.
Yeah, so it was found that you were treated no different to any other business that was struggling.
Absolutely correct. And of course, since the debt has been repaid as well. So again, that's important. If you're going to say that you're going to pay it back, then make sure you do.
And again, it's another sort of reflection of how public your life is as a politician, because actually all of us can get into difficulty, but to have your financial difficulties and your business difficulties public for everyone else is well, it's quite invasive, I think.
It's very intrusive into your life. I try to keep my business separate from my political life, as indeed the football club, which I thoroughly enjoyed being the chairman for 8 years of the 17 years that I was on the trustees there. But unfortunately, some people choose to try and mix it all in together, and I think that's a shame, really, because I think people would want their councillors to have another interest, to have outside interests, to be respected within business itself. Having traded in the high street for 28 years and paid business rates for 28 years, albeit that the last couple were paid towards the end, but they seem to have forgotten all the good things that you do over that period of time, when people would criticise the high street for being a ghost town and retail was closing down, and yet as a family business we were there for 28 years and stood by Gosport.
Yeah, absolutely. So on to the football club. I'm aware and I see sort of allegations about shady dealings going on, etc. Do you have anything you'd like to say to the local residents about that?
The football club has been a great hobby of mine because, again, like everyone else there, they're volunteers. It was run by a voluntary body. I was fortunate enough to be on the committee for a while, to be vice chairman for 3 years and chairman for 8 years before stepping down May last year. But during that period of vice chairman and chairman, we had taken the club from being a Wessex League club, promotions to Southern League South and West, promotions to Southern League Southern Premier, promotions to the Conference South. And in that time we won so many trophies. Everyone remembers the trip to Wembley and the final of the FA Trophy, the first round proper in the FA Cup, the first time in its history where we lost to Colchester 6-3. Then we won 2 Russell Coates Cups, we won 2 John Stimpson Memorial Trophies. As I said, we won the promotion playoff places. There's so many good things. A lot of success. The biggest victory in the club's history, 19-1. And during that time, when you're building up that success, it costs an incredible amount of money to run the club. And I think people actually don't realise, the wage bill for the final season in the Conference South was in excess of £300,000. And that doesn't come through the turnstiles. In fact, my family put a significant sum of money into the club, as did Alex and Jane Pike. We were directors, and we put in significant sums to keep the club going.
So when people say that the money's been taken out, it's quite the opposite. In fact, you've probably put money in.
Absolutely, but again, the people who say that should really go and have a look at the ground and try and remember what the ground was 11 years ago, because in that 11 years we've had a 328-seater stand, we've had the complete refurbishment of the clubhouse, we've had irrigation system on the pitch, we've had new toilets, new tea bar, refurbishing of the old stand. And again, that all costs money alongside the playing budget. So for those people who turned around and said, oh, there's some shady deals going on, I can assure you no shady deals. In fact, there was a lot of hard effort, a lot of time and a commitment to running that club, and delighted for the success it achieved over that period.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I guess for something like that club, for them to actually get successful, you've got to look like a successful club, haven't you? You've got to have good facilities. You've got to have a nice place for families to come and to support them.
As you go up the football pyramid, so the demands are greater on you. And so, for example, if you wanted to get into the playoffs and on the conference level, you needed to have 500 seats.
Yeah.
And we only had the new centre 328, so we actually had to put plastic seating into our stands.
Yeah.
You need to be able to walk around the ground and have a 1 metre concrete footpath around the ground. For conference, you needed to show that you had 3,000 capacity with the ability to go to 4,000. Get promoted, you need a 4,000 capacity with the ability to go to 5,000. So you have to think all along to make sure you meet those demands, and for future as well. So, but they were exciting times for the clubs, and you know, I will always remember the visit to Wembley. I will always remember Wembley when they put the 156 clubs that have played at Wembley on the arch. And if you look along the arch, and there was Gosport Borough, and my daughter took a photograph when they put Gosport Borough on there, just to remind people of the positive times we had. And of course, we're still playing a good level of football now. We're, you know, Southern League, Southern Premier, just beat Sitting Bull in the FA Cup. We've got a FA Cup game coming up.
Do you still support the team?
I do. You know, Gosport is my adopted hometown. I love Gosport, and I would support Gosport through and through.
No, thank you. And thank you for being so honest with us today. And I've been desperately wanting to ask you those questions.
More than happy to answer them. The important thing is that I know that as a club it was well run. Yes, when I left it owed 4 months' rent. But again, I paid 7 years, 8 months. Out of the 8 years I was there, it was 4 months behind. I regret that, and I regret that the new people haven't yet caught that up. But I think with the people who are running the club now, it's got a great way ahead.
No, it's fantastic. Thank you again for your time.
Thanks.